Hare Krishna. So, this evening we will continue with the pastime of Kaliya. Canto 10, Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter 16, verses 23 till 32. So, those who were here last time, what do you remember from last time? Whatever you remember. Yes.
Well, as the Lila was unfolding, we went from different degrees of different spiritual sentiments, more and more intense, to a frenzy of confusion, anxiety, lamentation, cowboys and parents and thinking almost dead. And it was getting seemingly from bad to worse.
Yeah.
It was Krishna was playing, and Balaram was very opening, smiling. You know that Krishna.
Balaram was smiling. Yeah.
Because Krishna is playing Kaliya. He's not in danger. Everyone thinks that the Lord of life, Krishna is in mortal danger, but the Balaram knew better.
Yeah. So yes, so Krishna jumped in the Yamuna to play sports, but Yamuna was poisoned by Kaliya, the snake, and therefore all the vegetation, all the trees, everything died around. But Krishna had a good time in the Yamuna, was splashing and making music with his arms. But Kaliya did not like the music and he came out very angry and he enwrapped Krishna in his coils and he stayed there for an entire muhurta. Muhurta is 48 minutes. And then all these residents of Vrindavan, they became in great anxiety. That even the cows, the cowboys, Mother Yasoda, Nanda Maharaj, they all came. They just wanted to jump into the Yamuna, give up their lives, because they were thinking Krishna is finished. So what's the use of our lives? Let us enter in the Yamuna. And then, but Balaram was smiling and said, but you know, Krishna will come out of it. If you jump into the Yamuna and you die, who is going to take care of Krishna if he comes out? That was the argument of Balaram. But now we are coming to the point here in this section that Lord Krishna will come out of the coils of Kaliya. I will see what happens now. And we will see gradually the devastating scene will turn into a festival. But Kaliya will learn his lesson. And Kaliya represents a contaminated heart, a heart full of envy, greediness, and Krishna will purify his heart. So while Krishna is dancing on the hoods of Kaliya to remove the poison from his heart, we pray that Krishna will also remove the poison of our hearts. So that's important to understand. We hear these pastimes, then there's always the point, what's therein for us to learn? It's important that we will see how merciful Krishna is to Kaliya, the serpent. Not an ordinary serpent. The serpents have heavenly forms and they have mystic power. They can change their forms. They are not ordinary. So we will hear text 23 till 32. We will hear the commentaries on this pastime, which are very revealing, of Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, and from Sanatana Goswami, from Jiva Goswami, from Sridhar Swami, and between we will also hear comments of Purijan Prabhu, who has taught me this course about 15 years ago. So text 23. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. And read the Sanskrit. Itam sva kukulam ananyagatim niriksha. Itam sva kukulam ananyagatim niriksha. Svastri kumaram atidukitam atmahetu. Akhyaya makhya padavim anuvahtamana. Ditvam muhurtam udatstitat urangabandat. The Lord remained for some time in the coils of the serpent, imitating the behavior of an ordinary mortal. But when he understood that the women, children, and other residents of his village of Gokul were in acute distress because of their love for him, their only shelter and goal in life, he immediately rose up from the bonds of the Kaliya serpents. Namo Vishnupada Krishna Vastaya Mutali Shimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namo. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gaurvani Pachari. Nirvashis Singhavadi Paskachai Desatarani Srila Prabhupada Ki. So the residents of Vrindavan, they were in great anxiety, in great distress, when they saw Krishna bound in the coils of Kaliya snake. Practically, their life breath had left their body. So he stayed in the coils of Kaliya for a muhurta. A muhurta is approximately 48 minutes. But it's a little flexible. So Sridhar Swami made a short comment. He said, seeing himself, who was their goal, and thus situated and understanding that the residents of his own Gokul were distressed on his account, he rose up from the bonds of the snake. Then we have a comment of Sanatana Goswami on this verse. It says, Itam means that their sorrow, their bewilderment, and so on failed to desist. They were extremely distressed. Ananya means unalloyed, No, Ananya means no other, it's pure. Steel has usually some alloys like nickel. This means there is a mixture of other metals within the steel. So the iron within may take different proportions according to the mixture. But if it is unalloyed steel, there is nothing mixed within at all. An alloy is a mixture. Unalloyed means that there is nothing mixed within it. So the devotees in Vrindavan were unalloyed, ananya, nothing else than their devotion and shelter of Krishna existed for them. So there is no alloy, there is no mixture of anything else, even not a tiny substance of anything else. They saw them as their Lord, and they considered Krishna, and Krishna considered, while he was in the coils of Kaliya, and he came, I must immediately give them protection, even if performing an impossible feat. Even if the performance of an impossible feat is necessary, does the Lord's natural inability to tolerate the distress of others is exhibited. Most specifically, because of the distress of its intimate associates, and because even more specifically, it was on his own account he rose up with great haste. Along with the women and children, separately indicated, the word here is sastri, the married ladies and the kumaris, the children, the young boys. By indicating these express a particular sorrow of Mother Yasoda and the young cowherd boys, the Lord associates headed by Sridham. Seeing his own Gokul distressed in that way, in the above described fashion, and ready to go their depths, and seeing himself as the master of Gokul, from whom besides himself there exists no other Lord, the Lord of these gopis, who had no other shelter, to be extremely distressed along with all women and young boys simply on his account. So they are ananya, they had no other mixture within their pure devotion. Sukadev Goswami indicate to Maharaj Pariksit that these gopis are exclusively devoted, just as you are. You are also ananya. You have no other mixture in you. That is an encouragement for Maharaj Pariksit. He has to meet his death in a few days. So their bhakti is ananya, no other mixture within. And Krishna is therefore obligated to protect them, save their lives. Similarly, Pariksit Maharaj is called Ananya here. He's going to leave this world soon because of his pure devotion to Krishna. The Lord will also protect Maharaj Pariksit. Therefore, and this is the commentary now of Sanatana Goswami. Therefore, a muhurta, a short time, he remained within the bonds of the snake body of the serpent. Thus he suddenly stood up and freed himself. But the actual understanding is that one who meets another with special affection by embracing you and so on, such a person does not forcibly free himself, but rather he remains embracing for some time. And then he stands up. It implies the fashion of ordinary behavior. remaining for Muhurta, he stood up from the bondage of the serpent. The reason for his rising is given, since his own Gokul were in such a condition that they would not remain alive without his rising up again. So Krishna is a protector of his devotees. So seeing that the Gokuls had no other lord and protector than himself, all of them, even women and children, he did rose up. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur now, he describes a muhurta as 48 minutes that Krishna remained stunned. But Sanatana Goswami, his analysis is quite interesting. Just that if you meet someone who embraces you with great affection, it is not polite the moment he embraces you to immediately pull you free. So similarly, when Kaliya embraced Krishna with the love that Sanatana Goswami described previously, because Sanatana Goswami said it is out of love Kaliya embraced him. So Krishna remained in that embrace for 48 minutes. Otherwise, it would be a show of impoliteness, and it would immediately, if he would immediately free himself from his loving embrace. But it became so difficult for the residents of Vrindavan, for they knew no one else than Krishna as their Lord. Krishna rose up. Vishwanath Bhattakur comments further. For a muhurta, 48 minutes, he remained if as stunned. Well, my dear Kaliya, you have had the chance to exhibit all of your prowess. Now this coward boy is going to exhibit the prowess of his strength. Just see of speaking, he rose up from the bondage of the serpent. Text 24. Tat pratyamana vapusha vyatitatma bhogas tvagvannamaya kupitas padan pujanga tasta swasanaranga vishambarisha stabdeksanol mukhamukho dharim ikshamana. His coils tormented by the expanding body of the Lord, Kaliya released him. In great anger, the serpent then raised his hoods high and stood still, breathing heavily. His nostrils appeared like vessels for cooking poison, and the staring eyes in his face like firebrands. Thus the serpent looked at the Lord. Srila Sanatana Goswami comments, breaking up the firmly envelopment of the serpent body by a slight expansion of his own divine body within the serpent coils. The serpent became angry on his account of experiencing pain. Because his own body became disturbed, Kaliya breathed repeatedly, loudly, expelling breath. And furthermore, it is expressed by the word spasana. His nostrils were poisonous, and as such his heavy breathing, due to his poisonous condition, became exaggerated. He was so angry. In this context, the word vishambarisha means vessel for cooking poison, a metaphor indicating the extreme redness of his eyes and being filled with evil poison, enviousness. Envy. His face contained firebrands on account of his releasing flames of blazing fire from his mouth. Be understood that each of the successive descriptions are more and more horrifying. This is exemplified by the fact that the serpent is being more poisonous than anyone else. The Lord here is called Hari. What does Hari mean? One who takes away. Even because of taking away the fault of Kaliya, which is his false pride, thinking I'm so powerful, or else because of Krishna's endeavor of stealing away the serpent's residence. By Krishna suddenly raising up, Lord Krishna was just looking at him. His heavy breathing and so on are stattvika transformations of ecstatic love. And in that context, the comparison to frying pan and so on are simply due to his born nature. We will hear that later. If we have other sessions, we will see that the wives of Kaliya will say, yeah, but he's born on us as a serpent. It's a body of ignorance, so it's naturally angry. What can he do? That we will hear that later. So seeing Kaliya's own body, which was forced by Krishna to expand, was being tormented and being broken by the expanding body of the Lord with his arms, knees, and so on, releasing the hold and giving him up. So raising high his own roots and breathing heavily, he simply remained watching. Kaliya's eyes were burning just as an ambarish, a vessel for frying hot poison and firebrands. Hot burning holes came out of his eyes. He was so angry. He could not tolerate that Krishna had released himself from his coils. So what will happen now? Tam Shivaya Vishikaya Parilelihanam Veshik Paniyati Karana Vishak Nitishim Kedanamun Parisasara Yata Kagendro Abramasopi Avasaram Pava Prasamik Samanam. Again and again, Kaliya licked his lips with his bifurcated tongues as he stared at Krishna with a glance full of terrible poisonous fire. But Krishna playfully circled around him, just as Garuda would play with a snake. In response, Kaliya also moved about, looking for an opportunity to bite. Krishna was jumping around and his hoods were following all the time, was following that. So, purport. Lord Krishna moved around the serpent so skillfully that Kaliya could find no opportunity to bite him. Thus the snake was defeated by Krishna's agility, moving like a monkey. Swami. Kaliya's powers was spoiled by the circling around of the Lord. Kaliya's shoulders were raised. Krishna's lotus feet became reddened by touching the many jewels of Kaliya's head. So on each head he had a jewel. That we have sometimes dangerous serpents with jewels on their head, the most dangerous is. But it may be questioned how he was able to dance on his heads. And Lord Hari played, moving around the serpent. He whose glance contained a fire of envious poison, each of his faces was licking itself with his tongue, having two tips. So his tongue was bifurcated. It was split into that he had many tongues, but he had many heads. So with his tongues, which have two front parts, he was repeatedly licking at all sides. It was his born nature to simultaneously lick both of his lips with the two sides of his tongue. Still, the implication is that he is now doing this excessively out of anger, which indicates the fearfulness of the situation. He was so angry that he wanted to kill Krishna, even though he was in such a condition. The Lord moved around him, moving at all sides, just for the sake of walking. Just as the king of birds, Garuda, even being able of immediately killing a snake, is simply wanders about for the sake of sport, which is the example of playing, and with which each step of the Lord Kaliya was carefully looking for an opportunity to bite. Or else it means that he was waiting for an opportunity because of his being unable to find such opportunity on account of the Lord's expertise in playing with the serpent. So in whichever way Krishna would move, Kaliya would move in the opposite direction. Whatever way Kaliya would move, Krishna would move also in the opposite direction. So going around and around and around, and Kaliya at every moment was trying to bite Krishna. And going around and around and around for a length of time, but Krishna was so agile, he could not do that. So text 26. Evam paribrahmahataya sam unnatam sam annamya tat petusiras adhirodhatya tam muftya ratna nikaras parsati tamra padam bujo kilakaladiko nanachtam. Having severely depleted the serpent's strength with his relentless circling, Sri Krishna, the origin of everything, pushed down Kaliya's raised shoulders and mounted his broad serpentine heads. Thus, Lord Sri Krishna, the original master of all fine arts, began to dance. His lotus feet, deeply reddened by the touch of the numerous jewels upon his serpent head. So we see here, suddenly the whole atmosphere becomes a festival. Krishna is dancing, and we will see the demigods will come and play music. That we will hear more details here. So Krishna jumped on Kaliya's head, which will prove to be a suitable dancing stage for Krishna. So he had more than 100 heads, and he was moving from one head to another as dancing platform. So observe the scene. All the residents of Vrindavan were in complete anxiety, staring at Krishna for minutes and minutes. 48 minutes passed. They were about to die. And while they were watching, Krishna started expanding, and they saw the snake suddenly release Krishna. And then Krishna and Kaliya encircled one another, and the snake became tired. And then in a moment, Krishna jumped up on the snake's head. And what does he begin doing? He begins dancing. This is wonderful. Every situation turns into a wonderful dramatic performance. So it becomes a festival. The Kaliya's body had jewels on it. Krishna's lotus feet was already pinkish, and they became still more reddish by the reflection of the jewels on the head of Kaliya. So in the purport here. In Sri Harivamsa states, Sri Osa Krishna Chakra Svahastena Vamanaya. Krishna grabbed Kaliya's head with his hand and forced it to bow down. Most people in this world are quite reluctant to bow down to the Supreme Person, the Absolute Truth. In the contaminated state called material consciousness, we conditioned souls become proud of our insignificant position and are reluctant to bow our heads before the Lord. Yet, just as Lord Krishna forcibly pushed Kaliya's head down and thus defeated him, the Supreme Lord's energy in the form of irresistible time kills all conditioned souls and thus forces them to bow down their arrogant heads. We should therefore give up the artificial position of material life and become faithful servants of the Supreme Lord, enthusiastically bowing down at his feet. So this material life is artificial, but why is it artificial? Because our material life is depending on our feelings of independence. We think ourselves independent. And that is artificial. It is unnatural and it's unreal. You have to bow down. Everyone has to bow down. Everyone has to die and bow down in this world. So Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains that Lord Krishna's lotus feet became red like copper because of their contact with the numerous heart jewels on the head of Kaliya. Lord Krishna, with those glowing reddish feet, then began to demonstrate his artistic skill by dancing on the unsteady moving surface of the serpent's hoods. This extraordinary demonstration of dancing skill was meant for the pleasure of the young women of Vrindavan, who at this phase of their relationship with Krishna were seriously falling in love with him. So just imagine how difficult it was for Kaliya. His heads, they were moving. He had 100 prominent heads, but they had moved. And they were all moving these heads. And while they were moving, Krishna is dancing so dramatically and artistically and dexterously upon each of the heads. So we can listen to these descriptions. So we have a comment also on commentary of Sridhar Swami. Sridhar Swami was one of the first commentators on Srimad Bhagavatam, very much appreciated by Lord Chaitanya. Kaliya's power was spoiled by the circling around of the Lord. His shoulders were raised, and Krishna's lotus feet became reddened by touching the many jewels on his head. One may question, how was he be able to dance upon these heads which were moving and unsteadily? He could do it because he is the original master of all arts. Sanatana Goswami comments, Kaliya's shoulders were raised, doubled, although his strength had been spoiled by the Lord's moving about, and therefore it is stated that Krishna forced him to become lowered. Kaliya's head had been described as has been described as wide, and thus it is expressed that on account of his heads to be very broad, it is a suitable stage. It's a suitable stage for the Lord's dancing. The phrase beginning with Tat Murta states that the Lord's special beauty as well as his absorption, he became absorbed in the movement of dance and its expertise in dancing. The original guru of all arts means the best of instructors. Ultimately, it can be deduced that Kaliya's great fortune, that the primeval one has climbed on his heads. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, making bow down he whose 2 shoulders were raised high, deprived of his strength due to the Lord moving around him. Kaliya was now incapable of moving around himself. The Lord forced his head to bow down with his single hand, and he climbed upon him, and he began to dance. There is also a description of the Harivamsa we have heard. So Krishna grabbed on Kaliya's head with his hand and forced him to bow down. All his heads had to bow down. Learn to bow down. 27. Tammahtamuchya tamabekshatada tadiya Gandharva siddha munisharana deva vatvam Vidyamridanga panavana kavatya gita Puspo Pahara Nutibisa Sopasedo. Seeing the Lord dancing his servants in the heavenly planets, the Gandharvas, the Siddhas, the sages, Sharanas, and wives of the demigods immediately arrived there. With great pleasure, they became accompanying the Lord's dancing by playing drums, such as Mridangas, Panavas, and Anakas. They also made offerings of songs, flowers, and prayers. So that makes the festival complete. So there is an interesting commentary by Burijan Prabhu. He says, this is the original Hindi movie in the middle of this drama. There is a great dancing going on. Now we see where it comes from. Just a few moments ago, there was the greatest devastating emotions elicited from all the residents of Vrindavan. Krishna decided to change the scene and is dancing on the heads of a snake. It's not a Western style, it's very delicate dancing, Bharatnatyam style, with his hands, eyes, and feet movement, very delicately done. The neck movements, and then immediately, and then in the middle of Krishna's dancing, all the demigods arrive, and they start playing drums, sowing flowers down, and accompanying the Lord with their dancing and offerings, offering prayers and songs. So, purport. When the demigods and other residents of higher planetary systems became aware that Lord Krishna was personally putting on a wonderful demonstration of the art of dancing, they immediately came to offer their services. Dancing becomes more enjoyable and beautiful to watch when it's accompanied by expert drum playing, singing, and the chanting of prayers. The artistic atmosphere was also enhanced by the showering of a multitude of flowers upon Lord Sri Krishna, who was blissfully engaged in dancing upon the hoods of the Kaliya serpent. So when the demigods and other residents of higher planetary systems, this was the purport. I just read it. But then there's a commentary also on Sanatana Goswami and also Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. But first Sanatana Goswami. Sanatana Goswami says, the paraphernalia offered for facilitating his dancing is described in this verse beginning with Tan. Then at that very moment, Tadiya, his personal servant Garuda, and the inhabitants of heaven, such as the Gandharvas, the Charanas, arrived to render service. The Charanas offered service by playing Mridanga, and so forth the Gandharvas by singing, and the wives of the demigods and the Apsaras by offering flowers. It would be unfitting for them to engage in dancing in consideration that the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself was dancing, because normally the Apsaras, they dance, but they didn't do it. Or else All the other goddesses also danced, although this is not expressly stated. There were also many other unmentioned paraphernalia of worship, such as various scents, fragments, ointments, and so on. And by the words of offering of prayers, the sages have also to be deduced as present. Sages were also there. So Krishna is always the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the all-powerful Supreme Lord of this universe, of all the universes and the spiritual worlds, and here is playing with his dearmost devotees, the residents of Vrindavan, performing the amazing pastime. He never loses his position when he plays in this way. Even without musical accompaniment, the Lord danced on the sound of tattai uttered from his own mouth. He was singing tattai while he was with his feet. In Indian dance, you have voice mantras that accompany the dancing. As Krishna was dancing and the drums were playing, Krishna made these sounds, tattai, tattai. And he's dancing completely dexterously. And the drums are playing. The prayers are being offered. Flowers are falling. And Krishna is dancing so expertly. And this is all, as our Acharya said, for the pleasure of the gopis. Krishna is dancing in that way to increase their ecstatic love for them. The ideas that the demigods then taught. What is the use of being established in the position of a demigod if we cannot accompany the Lord in his dancing? So that was their idea. Yachakshiro nanamatang rasatai kashirasnas tatan mamarta karadandodharom sripatai Shinayuso brahmata ulbanamasyato shin Nasto Vamam Paramakashmalamapanaga. Translation. My dear King, Kaliya had 101 prominent heads, and when one of them would not bow down, Lord Krishna would inflict punishment on cruel wrongdoers, would smash the stubborn head by striking it with his feet. Then as Kaliya entered his death throes, he began wheeling his head around and vomiting ghastly blood from his mouth and nostrils. The serpent thus experienced extreme pain and misery. So, that's text 21. So sometimes when dancers they pound the ground with their heels, with a loud, powerful sound. So Krishna would dance upon the head, and each time one head would come up, then Krishna would catch it with his foot and kick it with his foot and bang with his heels. And he was dancing and dancing. Tattai, tattai, tattai. Flowers were falling, drums were playing, and at the same time, he suddenly, he was subduing each one of the heads of Kaliya. Sridhar Swami says, by the word one hood, it indicates that there are many other hoods. 1,000 hoods. Kaliya was practically dead. The serpent had become weakened to the point of death. So Krishna, he was kicking each head that would not bow down. It's like us. Every part of our nature that does not surrender gets kicked by Krishna into submission. And devotees know that. The serpent became weakened to the point of death, and he was vomiting blood from his mouth and nostrils. Sridhar Swami, he said, Whatever head that would not bow down did not give us its it did not give up its stubbornness on the protect of dancing. It tramped it down by the strength of his feet. Thus Kaliya was in terrible pain, and Krishna did it so gracefully. Each toe of his body was all powerful. Each toe of his body was all powerful. And at the same time, Kaliya, from his face and nostrils, he was vomiting blood. Srila Vishwanath. Whichever head that did not bow down, that remained raised high. Forcibly climbing on it, Krishna immediately tramped it down with the gloves of his feet. 29. Tasyak Sibir Haralam Utfamata Sirasu Yat Yat Samanti Namati Nivas Pato Chain Mrityam Padanam Namayam Damayam Pabuva Pushpai Payuchitai Veyapumam Purana. Exuding poisonous waste from his eyes, Kaliya would occasionally dare to raise up one of his heads, which would breathe heavily with anger. Then the Lord would dance on it and subdue it, force it to bow down with his feet. Demigods took each of these exhibitions as an opportunity to worship him, the primeval personality of Godhead, with showers of flowers. So once again, Sridhar Swami, he said, with anger heavily breathing, whatever hood would rise up, he would strike down by striking of his foot. Thus the darling son of Yasoda, worshipped with flowers by the gladdened Gandharvas, just as they worshipped the primeval Lord, resting upon Seshanaga, Krishna subdued those heads. In other words, out of his mercy, he actually benefited Kaliya. So it is difficult to perceive the removal of our pride as to see it as the personal mercy of the kicking of Lord Krishna's lotus feet. So each time we raise up our heads, when it hits up in our consciousness, this pride, Krishna will subdue that by the force of time, or he will use another agent. So there is only Krishna who is doing this. It is by his mercy to convince us that we are tiny and that he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So Kaliya was very fortunate, and soon we will hear the cause of his fortune. Sanatana Goswami. Now only through his eyes he profusely vomited poison. By this it is understood that even at a point his glance was harsh, even at that point. Just see how stubbornly Kaliya kept his pride and his anger, thus thinking himself so powerful. By the strokes of his feet, by the movement of his dancing, by the particular movement, placement of his feet, Krishna carried out the trampling, the driving out of Kaliya's contamination, the sarpajati, the snake envy, or else by the touch of the Lord's lotus feet, Kaliya attained special good fortune, and therefore the Lord is inducing him to raise up his hoods. Kaliya is losing his vitality, and so on, as the Lord is exacting punishment upon such places as Kaliya's poisonous mouths. It is simply for the sake of dispelling its naturally perverted strength, pride, and so on. And thus by the ecstasy of pure love, Kaliya becomes stunned and is vomiting the refuse of the abandonment of all his contamination. He was subdued, means that he was forced to give up the natural contamination of his birth in such a species. By this, it is established that in actually the Lord acted beneficially, and that is also the explanation of Lila Swami. Srila Vishwanath has a short comment. Amongst his head, whatever was rising up by the striking of Krishna's feet, he is making them bow down. On that occasion, he is being worshipped by flowers showered down by elated Gandharvas and other demigods. Thus becoming satisfied, Krishna subdued the evil person, Kaliya, for the benefit of the demigods. Text 30. Tashitratam navavyoknapana sahasva raktam keruvaman nipavaknagatra shmitva saracha gurum purusham puranam narayanam tadamanar manasa chakami. My dear Parikshit, Lord Krishna's wonderful, powerful dancing trembled and broke all of Kaliya's 1,000 hoods. Then the serpent, profusely vomiting blood from his mouth, finally recognized Sri Krishna to be the eternal personality of Godhead, the supreme master of all moving and non-moving beings, Sri Narayan. Thus within his mind, Kaliya took shelter of the Lord. So look what it took for Kaliya to recognize Krishna. He had to get smashed. But we should also understand, and this will come out soon, that it's not just by becoming smashed in the material world that one will become surrendered and devotionally inclined and surrendered to Krishna. So just being smashed is not sufficient. That otherwise, everyone in this world would become a devotee, because there is so much suffering. Something is necessary to give meaning to that. Otherwise, there is no meaning. So Kaliya took shelter of the Lord. That so we will here purport. In chapter 16 of Krishna, Supreme Personality of Godhead, Srila Prabhupada points out that whereas previously Kaliya was vomiting poison, now his poison was exhausted and he began to vomit blood. Thus he had been cleansed of the vile contamination within his heart that had manifested as serpent's venom. The word Smitva, remembering, is very significant. The wives of Kaliya were actually serious devotees of the Lord. And according to the Acharyas, they had often tried to convince their husband to surrender to him. Finally, finding himself in unbearable agony, Kaliya remembered his wife's advice and took shelter of the Lord. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains that Kaliya's arch-rival had traditionally been Garuda, the carrier of Vishnu. But now Kaliya realized that he was fighting an opponent who was 1,000 times stronger than Garuda, who therefore could be only the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Thus Kaliya took shelter of Lord Krishna. So now Goswami says, because of the strong blows of his dancing due to his mercy, even though he was acting for the purpose of subduing, resulted in a wonderful exhibition of dancing by which Kaliya's thousands of hoods became wounded and broken. O king, this implies that just as a person as yourself can benefit from protecting the citizens, subdues and punishing the evil, for their actual benefit in the same way Krishna acted. From the actual viewpoint, however, because of him becoming all successful by just dancing upon each of his heads, Kaliya got extreme mercy. Thus, by the word Viruchna, it is hinted that the excessive powerful dancing was for the purpose of increasing Kaliya's good fortune, of the mercy in the guise of above described trampling. In this way, all of his hoods became broken, and Kaliya became humbled due to the dispelling of his intoxication. From the actual viewpoint, from the diminishing of the original inner contamination, and by the awakening of his pure consciousness, he remembered the transcendental personality of Godhead. Following, he surrendered to him, and as described with the words Smritva. His surrender was to the Father and spiritual master of all moving and non-moving beings, because he is the primeval personality, the original of all. This is because he is Narayan, from whose navel comes the lotus, which is the form of all the worlds. These are by all means reasons for Kaliya's taking shelter. Smritva, remembering, means placing him, even though Krishna was forgotten within his mind, for else thinking about Narayan, he approached him for shelter. Within his mind, because of his inability to say aloud, "I'm yours," due to his great pain, is the reason for taking shelter within his mind. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, in the form of the Supersoul, is always present, seating in the city of the heart. From the actual viewpoint, the idea is recognizing that Lord Krishna is Narayan. Why? Because of his possessing greater weight and all of the moving and non-moving beings that fill the entire universe. Moreover, because he is the primeval personality. The idea being that even in his childhood, he is actually not a child, since he displays special arts of dancing and so on. Therefore, he took shelter of him and remembered Sri Krishna's Narayan. Does he consider that he had heard from his wives? Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, even previously, the seed of devotion had been sown within him from the mercy of his wives, who were exalted devotees. But because of the predominance of his fault in anger, due to previously committed offenses, it was not able to grow into a sprout in Kaliya's heart. Just as a seed grown in a field which was not good. And at that time, however, by the touch of the Lord's divine feet and by receiving the punishment enacted by him, these various faults became eliminated. And suddenly that seed of devotion grew into a sprout described with the words beginning Smritva. He could see that that this person had 1,000 times more strength than my enemy Garuda. Therefore, this must be the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the spiritual master of all moving and non-moving beings, devotion to whom I was advised by my wives. These are Kaliya's words. Such became revealed by his own power of remembrance. Trying to show my exceptional strength, he thought I advertised myself as greatly foolish, but mercifully he had placed his foot on my head, and thus by becoming my spiritual master has shown satisfaction. Now I shall approach him for shelter. Text 31. Krishnasya garba charato tibara vasanam pashni prahara parirukna panapatram tishtva vaim madhyama pupase duramusya patnya artan shata vasana bhushana keshavandam. When Kaliya's wife saw how the serpent had become so fatigued from excessive weight of Lord Krishna, who carries the entire universe in his abdomen, and how Kaliya's umbrella-like hoods had been shattered by the striking of Krishna's heels, they felt great distress. With their clothing, ornaments, and their hair scattered in disarray, they approached the eternal personality of Godhead. Now the purport. According to Srila Vishwanath Saraswati Thakur, Kaliya's wives had been disgusted with their husband because of his demoniac activities. They had been thinking, if this atheist is killed by the punishment of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, let him be killed. We will become widows and engage in the worship of the Supreme Lord. But then the ladies noticed Kaliya's facial expression and other bodily features, and they understood that Kaliya had indeed taken shelter of the Lord within his mind. They could see it. So seeing that he was manifesting symptoms of humility, remorse, regret, and doubt, they thought, just see how fortunate we are. Our husband has now become a Vaishnava. Therefore, we must now endeavor to protect him. They felt affection for their repentant husband and severe distress because of his miserable position. And thus altogether they went into the presence of the Supreme Lord. So Sanatana Goswami comments, even though the Supreme Lord has become satisfied by Kaliya's taking shelter, he acted in order to show special mercy to his wives, in order to show their greatness. Their transcendental understanding caused by their greatest surrender is described in 2 verses beginning with Krishna. By comparing his hoods to umbrellas, although very broken, hints at the downfall of his evil opulence. Because an umbrella in Vedic culture represents royal opulence here. So their approach means that they went to Kaliya's side, and because of their being distressed, their clothes were disarranged. Jiva Goswami comments, even though Kaliya was fatigued by taking shelter in this manner, still his wives found it more appropriate to approach Krishna who is standing upon his head, as described in 2 verses, beginning with Krishna. So the phrase Garbha Jataha implies that Krishna is all-powerful. And now the final verse before the prayers of the Nagapatnis, the wives of Kaliya. So that's the last verse for today. There are a lot of comments on it. Tastam suvichna manaso taparas pitach pakayam nidaya bhuvabhota bhatim panemu. Satya Kitanjali Buddha Samalasya Vastur Mokshe Sava Saranadam Saranam Prapanam. Their minds very much disturbed, those saintly ladies placed their children before them, and then bowed down to the Lord of all creatures, laying their bodies flat on the ground. They desired the liberation of their sinful husband and the shelter of the Supreme Lord, the giver of ultimate shelter. And thus they folded their hands in supplication and approached him. So the next 21 verses will be the prayers of the Nagapatnis. Sridhar Swami comments, they having taken shelter of him, bow down being overwhelmed in their minds. Upon the ground means that very place underneath the water or else on the shore. They desire is for liberation of their husband, even though he was sinful by nature, or else then desire to be freed from his contamination. Sanatan Goswami, whose mind was subhishna, very agitated, which means that they were very fearful and in anticipation of their husband's death, or else much pain. This expresses the special excellence of their bowing down, or else surrendering because of great humility, placing their bodies on the ground, falling down as a rod. They placed their children in front of them. It was for the purpose of inducing mercy. Why were they not able to approach Krishna? It is due to their husband's offense. The reply is that Krishna is the Lord of all living entities. In other words, they dared to approach him because they had no other goal besides him. Therefore, whatever offense there was on the part of their husband, they wanted that to be relieved, undone, or else they wanted his release from his contamination, or else they desired this liberation of the release of their husband of material existence, even though he was an offender. Why? Because they were saintly ladies, devoted to their husband, or else they were full of devotion for Lord Krishna. Therefore, it was quite befitting that he gave them the special mercy of his lotus feet. And its lotus feet who grants shelter, Sharanadam, means one who granted them shelter in the lake. Otherwise, it would not have been possible for Kaliya to take shelter of this lake in Vrindavan. This was Krishna's special mercy. Or else, wherever there is a situation arranged by an actual protector, the fact is that he is protected, in fact, by Krishna's arrangement. The fact that someone is protected is ultimately Krishna's arrangement. Krishna is the ultimate protector, and all other protectors depend on his protection. They were taking shelter of him in full surrender. They were crying in distress, please, please protect us, or else they are taking shelter of him who is the protector of all dangers. Or else the idea is that they are approaching Lord Krishna for shelter in the sense that he's being prepared to offering prayers. For the actual point of view, they felt that they were implicated in Kaliya's offenses because of their relationship with him, and soon, and because of the violence that have been committed by the living beings residing in Vrindavan, by the fire of his contaminated poison, they were praying, please give us shelter. Jiva Goswami says, placing their bodies on the ground, the hints that there was an island in the middle of the lake. Srila Vishwanath Bhakti Thakur says, first they bowed down to him on the ground, indicates that there was an island in the middle of the lake situated upon where Krishna was enveloped by Kaliya and was seen by the residents of Gokul. They put their children in front of Krishna for the purpose of inspiring compassion from Krishna. They will now begin to speak. That's Kaliya's purification, that he got Krishna's mercy. Just the Bhagavatam further at the end says, just by hearing this pastime, our heart becomes purified. And that everyone benefits by just hearing that. And it's wonderful to hear all these commentaries of these previous acharyas who gives us deeper insight on what is really happening there. That is Shastra Chakshu, seeing to the eyes of give you that chance. So, any comments? Yes.
Thank you, Lord. Should we take it that if the devotee is there, that means more or less whatever happens to him is still by Krishna? Because that's what it seems to indicate there, that Krishna takes care personally of his purification. So is that true of everything in the devotee's life?
There is the there's the easy way and there's a difficult way. That you have Srila Prabhupada says, yeah, you have first class, second class, third class. One who hears that stealing is bad and therefore does not steal, it's first class. Second class is one hears that stealing is bad, but still he has the inclination until he sees someone who steals and who is arrested and say, okay, I don't do it. I've seen it now. But the third class is one who first has to be arrested and then he will not steal anymore. That's third class. So it's up to us. The easy way is hearing the Bhagavatam. You hear the Bhagavatam, your heart becomes purified, and it's gone. But if we don't have time to hear the Bhagavatam and still we want to become a devotee, and that no time, then yeah, Krishna will help you in your daily life to give up your attachment, if you are, provided you are sincere. That it's up to us which way we will learn. But mostly it's the combination also. We learn by hearing and we learn by experiencing. That if we don't want, we want to become purified, but due to excessive attachment, we cannot give it up. Then Krishna, and that's explained in the Bhagavatam 10:88. 8. 10:88:8. I remember always this number because I experienced it many times in my life. Therefore, I remember that 10:88. Yasyan angrina mi arishitatanam sanaitautadam tyantyasyat vajna dukadukidam. The personhood of God has said, if I especially favor someone, I greatly derive him from his wealth. Then the relatives and friends of such a poverty-stricken man abandon him. In this way he suffers one distress. We are too attached. Krishna will take away what we are attached to. And now we have Gaur Aarti, which is starting. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much. Jai Prabhupada.